The inhabitants of a small kingdom in distant dreamland lived quietly. The country was ruled by a head, left without a wife, alone with a little daughter and numerous problems and government concerns. Everything was fine until monsters began to conquer the lands one after another, turning people into similar monsters. An ancient legend said that the world could be saved by sacrificing a member of the royal family to the gods. The king remembers his illegitimate daughter, Olivia, who, after the incomprehensible death of her mother, settled in the palace and limped on her left leg, and declares her a princess, thereby deciding the girl's fate. The real heir to the throne, Sophia, was glad to get rid of her named sister, constantly humiliating her. The only opponent of the sacrifice was the young high priest Stephen, who liked the girl for her patient nature and kindness. When the daughters were 20 years old, the father organized a sacrifice ceremony, planning to appease the ancient god and order him to kill all the monsters, caring for the people and the future of the kingdom, and also wanting to have personal extraterrestrial support. The victim was to be torn to pieces by the deities who lived in the crypt. The young lady did not want to die, but tears did not soften the ruler's decision. The priest took the resisting Olivia to an ancient stone gate, behind which, according to legend, there was a world of chaos. The girl was left with no choice and was pushed into the abyss, the doors closing behind her back. A feeling of fear gripped the princess. In the darkness, she felt something hot next to her, screamed, and tried to fight off invisible enemies. Time dragged on for a long time. Periodically, the girl's strength left her. Her whole body ached and burned. She could not understand what was happening to her and where to go. Unknown forces swirled around in complete darkness, causing even more panic. Feeling something huge and warm behind her, the girl froze, slowly taking out a hairpin from her hair, the only sharp object that none of the servants noticed. The life of the king's second daughter was unenviable. She never had servants, luxurious clothes, and apartments. She did not know the love of her family, but Olivia did not want to die. With all her might, the princess stuck her small weapon into some soft form until a void was formed. 2 huge yellow pupils shone in front. Glowing eyes captivated the girl's gaze. This was the last thing she saw before losing consciousness. From the darkness appeared the shadow of a young man with a burning gaze. The young man carried the king's daughter out of the cave into the palace hall. As if in a fog, the events of her life flew by in the girl's head. Her father's last decision to sacrifice her. Since childhood, the lameness of a child was a reason for constant ridicule and shame for a noble family. The presence of a defect made the girl withdrawn and silent. Her sister and her friends from noble families constantly mocked her. The last memory was fever and unbearable pain throughout my body. The girl took a deep breath and opened her eyes. Olivia could not understand where she was and why she was lying on a luxurious bed in a huge, beautiful room with many paintings, mirrors, and flowers. The princess realized that she was in Sophia's room. She had only been here once. Numerous servants stood around her. The sister, along with her elite entourage, constantly offended the girl. Now the hands of these enemies were reaching out to Olivia to help and give her a glass of water. The girl did not understand what was happening and what caused the change in relationship. Most of the bullying and mean words always came from Kate's eldest friend, a girl from a very rich and famous mountain duchy. The humility and gentle look of the servants surprised the king's second daughter. The main character did not want to see anyone, since the shock from the events had not yet passed, and asked everyone to leave the bedroom. The noble lady tried to calm the commoner, explaining that she was following the instructions of the ruler. After the terrible ordeal, the princess's gaze became thoughtful. She even changed in appearance. Olivia could not believe that her father wanted her dead, although by right the victim should have been the beloved daughter of the ruler of the state. Kate tried to keep a low profile. The maids explained that the king himself ordered the girl to be brought to Sophia's room after the ceremony, so they did not dare disobey, fearing punishment. The young victim did not want to hear anyone and persistently asked to leave. Suddenly, the first princess burst into her bedroom, waving her arms angrily. The sisters loudly sorted things out. Sophia tried to kick the lame woman out of her chambers. The senior maid and friend tried to restrain the mistress, who did not hear her father's demands. Kate was older and smarter than the princess, and she tried to warn the young lady against acting rashly, given her father's orders. Bursting with resentment, the girl threatened reprisals against her friends who did not comply with her whims. The king himself entered the maiden bedroom, which became a field of heated discussions. The father looked at the condition of his second daughter without a shadow of regret about what he had done, making sure that she was fully conscious. Restoring justice, the first princess hysterically tried to find out why the hated simpleton was sitting on her bed. The head of the family ordered the unfortunate Olivia to stand up, but the girl did not move. Her gaze became firmer and more confident, which amazed the man. These eyes pierced the king right through and even frightened him. Unable to bear it, the owner of the palace hit his disobedient daughter, as he had done repeatedly since childhood. Olivia was no longer afraid. Betrayed by her closest person, she returned from the ceremony changed. Still, I had to get up. I had to go to the living room, and the girl realized that her leg was very painful again, causing her to limp even more. The father ordered the main character to follow him. The huge room with candlesticks and colonnades shone with brilliance. The girl was accompanied by guards, not allowing her to make a choice and turn aside. The high priest was already waiting for them in the hall. Judging by the look, Stephen was the only person who was sincerely glad to see Olivia alive after the sacrificial offerings, and felt guilty towards the girl. The men were having a conversation, the essence of which was absolutely incomprehensible to the princess. The priest tried to explain something to his master. Stephen said that the ancient gods can listen to the wishes of their master, but are not obliged to fulfill them. The ruler of the state did not want to listen to anything. The king suggested repeating the procedure of making a sacrifice in order to replace the appeared deity with a more accommodating one, which greatly frightened the girl. Olivia categorically refused to take the test again. The answer to the girl's words was another slap in the face, knocking her off her feet. The huge, beautiful eyes of the child looked at the king, but there was no longer any fear in them. The head of state did not understand what was happening and why he was even frightened by the calm look of his former victim. The father decided to restore his status by force and grabbed the girl by the hair. The door to the chambers opened to punish the disobedient one, and the shadow of a stranger appeared on the threshold. In an authoritative voice, the person who entered indignantly explained why his orders were not carried out. The sovereign and the priest did not expect the guest to appear, but their submissive appearance told the main character that this was a respected gentleman. Olivia saw for the first time an ancient deity who appeared from behind the stone gate after making a sacrifice, and, for a reason unknown to everyone, did not kill her. The young man accepted the greetings in silence. A tall, slender brunette approached a fragile little girl sitting on the floor. The young man spoke to the main character and tried to calm her down. The pause dragged on. Their eyes met and carefully studied each other. Armando, as the ancient god was called, extended his hand to the girl. Olivia had met these eyes somewhere before, but could not remember under what circumstances. The young man helped the princess up. All this time the king was silent, humbly bowing his head. But the ruler's obedience did not last long. As an owner, he demanded God to carry out his orders. The head of state could not understand why Mr. Armando did not obey him. Tired of listening to the king's cries, the ancient god raised his voice. The princess's father felt a severe headache and lost his hearing for several minutes. Having calmed down a little, the king listened to the guest. Olivia was surprised. She could not imagine that her formidable father could be afraid of someone. The high priest silently bowed his head as a sign of deep respect for the arriving deity. Mr. Stephen was against repeating the ritual. Armando again tried to explain to the king the essence of the ancient rite. Those present listened carefully to every word of the speaker. The head of the country did not like what God said at all. He expected a different outcome and realized that he had no power over the extraterrestrial being. A young man with a luminous gaze advised the tyrant to kneel before his daughter and ask for forgiveness for all the years of bullying and humiliation. The eminent person left, and the young people were left alone. The high priest asked for the blessing of the higher mind and left the palace. In parting, Stephen apologized to the girl for not being able to convince her father to cancel the sacrifice. The temple's chief minister was glad that Olivia was feeling better and wished her a full recovery. The princess liked the high priest for his steadfast character and decency, and she thanked him for his sympathy and support. The head of the temple invited the princess to stay for a while in the monastery hotel. The girl did not want to stay in the palace and happily agreed. The sight of the new housing struck her with its cleanliness and convenience. The monastery servants knew the difficult fate of the main character and tried in every possible way to help. Olivia was happy that she was able to leave her relatives. The girl remembered the words of God again and again, suddenly learning that she was the mistress of the deity and the salvation of the people from monsters was in her hands, that only Armando would carry out her instructions. Early in the morning, the king stopped by the temple to visit his daughter. The head of the family suggested that the girl return to the palace and start a new relationship, but she did not believe the beautiful words. When the father promised to treat his daughter with love and put her on equal terms with her sister, she could not stand it and laughed. For many years, Olivia was humiliated. Not a single kind word was said. She was chosen as a victim to the ancient gods. And now, when she has an external force, the head of the family invites her to forget the past years and start all over again. Without hesitation, the main character refused to return home. In exchange for the help of the deity, the girl invited her father to fulfill her conditions. The Lord was angry and shouted loudly at the child, forgetting all previous promises of love and affection. The main character was adamant, and the king had to pacify his pride. There were only 3 demands. The girl was in no hurry to reveal everything. Olivia expressed the opinion that her sister was a full-fledged member of the royal family, and it was she who had to become a sacrifice in the name of destroying monsters and restoring peace. The main character understood that for the ruling nobility, gossip was the main problem, destroying a stable existence. The girl waited until her father calmed down and was ready to listen to the conditions. With a straight face, the king listened to the one whom he considered a commoner and a disabled woman, despite the fact that after the death of her mother, he declared him his second daughter and took her to the palace. Olivia knew that monster attacks on cities were the main problem of the state, so she presented her most important wish so far. The princess announced that she was going to leave the palace and live outside it, choosing for this the small but strong Duchy of Magdeburg on the outskirts of the kingdom. As one would expect, the head of the kingdom was furious. He did not want unnecessary conversations and squabbles. The place was not chosen by the main character by chance. There were legends about the nobility and integrity of its owner, Duke Warren. The old duke in his heart did not approve of the methods of rule of his king, but was always out of politics and personally defended the state, participating in battles against monsters and helping neighbors free of charge. Forced to agree to his daughter's demand, the head of the family left the temple living room. Olivia couldn't believe that she would soon be free. The main character sat and recalled the moments of a difficult conversation with her father. The girl considered her main concern to be helping captured cities and freeing them from monsters. Armando, as always, appeared suddenly and saw the tired hostess taking a nap right at the table. The young man carried the beauty onto the bed. Tired from a hard day, the girl did not even wake up. The sunny morning came. It was time to get up and have breakfast. The temple servant brought food and looked after the princess. The girl was surprised. She had never had servants before, and she had never been a guest. Olivia went for a walk in the monastery garden. The girl missed the strong, handsome man with whom they were connected by a terrible ordeal. The young man immediately appeared nearby. The young people were happy with each other and talked quietly near the snow-covered 100-year-old oak tree. The ancient god explained to his mistress that for them to meet and fulfill requests, it is enough to simply think about his appearance or give a specific instruction that should be within their sight. Armando suggested trying it and asked about the princess's favorite time of year. The answer about spring did not surprise the young man, and immediately gardens began to bloom around the couple and birds began to chirp. The girl realized that simply an order to save the state from monsters has no power, and a miracle will not happen. The young man suggested choosing a desire for himself personally, without thinking about the rest of the world. Olivia was embarrassed to express the main dream that was now occupying her thoughts. The young man was very gentle but persistent. He was excited by the proximity of the beauty. The main character thought, afraid to say something out loud. Having made up her mind, Olivia asked for help to leave the palace as quickly as possible, despite the fact that this would cause a lot of gossip. For the first time, the girl thought about herself. Now she only wanted freedom. The Duchy of Magdeburg, the only one that constantly provides forceful support to its neighbors in the fight against monsters, including the owner himself and his grandson Greg, was ready to accept a member of the eminent family after learning about the desire of the king's second daughter to stay in this beautiful place. It was at this time that the first princess visited Warren Castle, hoping to meet the younger heir, with whom she was secretly in love. But her wait lasted for an hour, and the girl was irritated. Coming out of the family meeting room, young Duke Greg was surprised by the appearance of an uninvited guest. He was clearly puzzled by something. The young man apologized to Sophia, saying that he would not be able to give her a single minute of time, since he was immediately leaving the duchy to carry out the instructions of his grandfather. The princess was very upset. She traveled a long way to meet a heroic young man who had taken part in battles with monsters more than once. Olivia could not believe her little happiness when she heard from the high priest the news that the duchy had agreed to accept her. A young gentleman arrived to accompany the guest to his castle. This was the request of the eldest duke. The young man greeted the princess and expressed his respect. Sophia, having heard at the estate that Greg had gone to the royal temple and decided to follow her chosen one, was very surprised to see him next to her hated sister. Olivia wanted not to delay the trip and leave immediately. The carriage was prepared, and the young people set off. The girl was traveling for the first time and looked out the window with curiosity. The trip was short, but the main character was very impressed. In the courtyard of a huge, beautiful castle, the guest was greeted with honor and respect by Warren himself and his servants. Coming out of the carriage, the princess stumbled and her bad leg sprained. Greg, who was nearby, saved her from falling. The large room amazed the girl. She could not believe that she would live here. The luxuriously furnished room had everything you needed for business and relaxation. The poor girl had never had anything like this in the palace. The young duke offered to examine his leg. In combat, he acquired small skills in the art of medicine. Olivia had to tell the whole truth, which did not bother the guy at all. The young man was surprised that the king, despite having all the possibilities, did not treat his daughter. After a medical examination, Greg concluded that there is a chance for recovery. You just need to thoroughly address the problem. Leaving the main character, the Duke ordered the servants to keep the fire burning and bring the girl food and warm clothes. While Olivia was enjoying the first hours of freedom, Sophia's friend Duchess Kate remembered that her father had a family heirloom about ancient deities and decided to study the manuscript in more detail, learning a lot of interesting things and coming up with an insidious, vainglorious plan to seize the throne. Life in the palace was in full swing. The king greeted guests and tried not to listen to gossip. One fine day, a modest priest came to the head of state and told a secret, offering his help. The bishop was surprised and agreed, realizing that this affected his personal interests. At the royal council, a city was identified to provide assistance in the fight against monsters, and the young duke got ready to set out. It was not the first time that he and his brave grandfather took part in battles. Having learned the decision of the Round Table, Olivia offered to provide assistance to another settlement, which was currently in greater need of urgent support and liberation from monsters. The young man agreed with the princess's arguments. The final meeting of the military council, headed by the ruler of the state, before the performance of the soldiers, was in full swing. The king changed the plan of attack, sending the army instead of the city of Lorac to Carlos. This decision surprised his daughter. Deciding to rectify the situation, the girl, accompanied by Greg, arrived at a closed meeting of senior military officers. The father was extremely dissatisfied with Olivia's appearance. She was never present at such events, although theoretically she had the right. Military leaders and noble aristocrats agreed to listen to the princess. The girl insisted on the first option, defending the almost lost city and its inhabitants, who desperately needed help. This was their only chance. After a long, noisy debate, the members of the meeting were forced to agree with the convincing arguments of the young lady. The main character expressed a desire to go with the ancient god along with troops to defeat the monsters. The youngest member of the council, the Duke of Baxter, was present at the meeting. Despite his age, he already had experience in military operations. Unexpectedly, the eminent gentleman supported the princess's arguments, deciding the outcome of the dispute. The dissatisfied ruler was forced to agree with the majority. The members of the Round Table decided not to delay the army's departure and leave early in the morning. The servants of the ducal castle were delighted to learn that their guest, together with the impressive force in the person of Armando, would participate in the liberation of the cities. They believed in success and thanked the girl for her bold decision. The main character was shocked by such a kind attitude of ordinary people and did not know what to answer. The night turned out to be sleepless, and Olivia went out onto the terrace. The silent god was nearby. The young man calmed the girl down and sent her to bed. She had to leave the hospitable duchy early in the morning. The road was long and very tiring. It was still very far from Carlos when the sky on the horizon turned scarlet. The main character looked in fascination from the carriage at an incomprehensible spectacle. Armando, who was galloping nearby on a horse, explained that the color means the level of capture of the city by monsters. If everything is scarlet, it means there are no living people left, and the city is completely captured by enemies. Greg revealed the secret to his companion, saying that monsters kill residents and turn them into their own kind, which significantly increases their number. Olivia was horrified by the new information, feeling sorry for the poor people. The girl was interested in whether a person could return to his own form. The deity's answer was negative. The convoy stopped for the last night before arriving at the almost captured city. It was very cold and the princess could not sleep. Armando met her near the fire. The young man was worried about his mistress and tried to calm the beauty down, reminding her of the requirements for following her instructions. Finally, the squad arrived at their destination. The mayor met the princess, talking about the difficult situation and pointing out the old castle where the monsters had gathered to conduct the reincarnation ritual. The sky above the city was on fire, so it was almost completely captured by the enemies. The main character was very tired, but there was no time to hesitate, and the brave men went to the place where the monsters were gathering, since the destructive power of the ancient god acted only in the area of visibility of the object. Armando watched with attention as the young duke cared for the girl, each time discovering something new for himself and remembering previously unknown information about human relationships. The whole earth was saturated with the slime of monsters, and Greg took his companion in his arms. The ancient god was ready for action and was waiting for the girl's order. The trio entered a dilapidated castle, all covered in sticky traces of monsters. A large spiral staircase led to the roof where the enemies were located. The boys took turns supporting the tired girl. The picture that revealed itself was terrible. To the ominous music of inhuman screams and moans, monsters and souls of the dead city residents flew around and danced some kind of ritual dance. The monster's gaze turned to the new arrivals. Instantly, a large clawed hand appeared directly above the princess's head, and the girl's heart stopped beating for a moment in horror. Forgetting about Armando, Olivia begged for help. There was silence. The girl was afraid to open her eyes. Hearing the cheers, the princess looked around. The monsters had disappeared, and the rescued residents were hugging joyfully, the clear blue sky shining over the city. The girl thanked God for saving her. The princess was really very scared and did not believe in victory. Greg told the beauty that the surviving people want to meet the heroine and thank her for the miracle. Dozens of townspeople gathered in the square to see Olivia and say words of gratitude. The mistress of the local lands asked the princess to take an oath of allegiance. The rescued promised to always protect the princess with a sword and shield and to come to her aid at any moment. The carriage was ready. Early in the morning, it was time to get ready for the return journey. The girl refused to spend the night in the castle and was sitting in thought by the fire when Armando silently appeared. The main character screamed out of surprise. She could not get used to the sudden appearances and disappearances of the deity. Olivia was bored alone and recalled her first encounters with an extraterrestrial being. The young man took the girl to the bedroom. She needed to rest before a long journey. She asked her friend to help restore the city, and the young man said that he could not fulfill all wishes. Some required a symbolic payment, that she had a main wish that he must fulfill at any time. That is his mission. The topic was postponed. The main character did not want victims. The road back seemed much shorter. Enthusiastic residents of the duchy and inhabitants of the castle greeted the winners. The guests' room was filled with numerous gifts from grateful people. Olivia never had anything. She was completely confused. The blue sky did not please, but rather frightened the king. He realized that the city was liberated, and its inhabitants would support the savior until the end of their days, creating a threat to his family. The father called the rebellious daughter to the palace. She did not understand the reason and did not want to return home. The arriving princess was met by the chief assistant and bodyguard of the head of state, Duke Sullivan, who had not liked the simple girl since childhood. Olivia was immediately sent to the king's chambers. The princess had never been in her father's rooms and was a little nervous. The head of the family, as always, was rude and irritated. The victory did not change his mood. The king insisted on returning his daughter to the palace in order to avoid gossip and keep her under control, given the growing support for the young princess from the people of the country, as well as carrying out a repeat sacrifice procedure with the participation of Sophia, which one priest advised him. Armando, who was present during the conversation, laughed at the king's senseless idea, surprised at how the father would give up his beloved daughter to be torn to pieces, and explaining that death is inevitable. The enraged head of state could not understand why the first victim remained alive, and hoped that the same story would happen to Sophia, and she would have her own ancient god who would obey the king. The young man's incomprehensible phrase that the first girl had already made a sacrifice firmly burned into Olivia's memory. At this time, Duchess Kate reported to her mistress that her sister had arrived and was in her father's chambers, who could marry her to the young duke whom the young lady liked. The news of the hated relative infuriated the girl, and the pre-thought-out proposal for revenge came at the right time. The king tried not to think about his unloved daughter, remembering the advice of the priest and the plan for revenge. Armando offered to take the girl into the room. She was surprised by his new manners and constant attention to her. Olivia spent her entire childhood in the circle of enemies and got used to relying only on herself. The ritual of sacrifice only confirmed her theory, so she was frightened and worried about the sensitive attitude of the ancient god. She was afraid to trust him, because she understood that he was not eternal and would disappear as soon as will fulfill her main desire. The girl tried to hide her gradually growing fear of separation from the young man, promising to contact the young man whenever necessary. The eyes of the main character said the opposite. Deciding to learn more about the sacrifice and rebirth of the ancient deity, Olivia went to the temple. The high priest was glad to meet the princess. Stephen asked the heroine how the battle went, and said that only a sacrifice can revive the ancient deity, which means that a murder had already taken place, which now saved the girl's life. Olivia didn't remember anything about what happened, and that made her even more worried. The priest clarified that the rituals are carried out only with the participation of the temple, and promised to help Olivia. On the way out, the girl unexpectedly ran into Sophia, who was rushing to meet the clergyman. The sister was irritated and began to sort things out with her rival. Communication with the first princess strained Olivia. She wanted to quickly end the quarrel and leave to prepare for the next trip. The departure was planned for the morning. But Sophia accused her sister of not wanting to help and share Armando's influence, and of interfering with the repeat ceremony. The princess did not believe the words of the main character about possible death, considering them to be tricks and revenge for previous grievances. The royal personage was increasingly inclined to sacrifice herself in order to take possession of the extraterrestrial power of the deity. Greg, who was waiting for Olivia, heard loud sounds, entered the temple, and was surprised to see a screaming princess accusing his guest of all sins. The couple retired to get ready, and Sophia firmly decided to deal with the hated commoner who could take everything from her, including her lover. The main character lay in her room and recalled the humiliations she had experienced since childhood, and understood that having fulfilled her main desire, Armando would disappear forever, again leaving her in a hating family. The girl wondered where to get her own strength and skills to resist the cruel world. The ancient god could not believe the king's decision to repeat the sacrifice, and was looking for ways to avoid unpredictable consequences. The girl finally understood that their meeting in the temple was not accidental, Sophia was going to the priest to agree on a new ritual. Postponing the trip, Olivia and the young Duke tried to meet with her sister in order to dissuade her from the crazy act. But the unapproachable Lady Kate did not allow the girl and her companion into the princess's chambers. The main character could not understand why her first friend did not object to the sacrifice. The girl's attempt to meet with the high priest also ended in failure. At the entrance to the temple, the security of the head of state personally with Sullivan stood and did not allow anyone inside. All night, the main character tried to find a way out and save Sophia. Olivia recalled the difficult years of childhood, insults, and humiliation from her closest family, and could not understand why she was trying to help them. The sleepless night bore fruit. The girl remembered what helped her in the pitch darkness of the crypt and ran back to the palace. The main character was lonely. She needed the moral support of the ancient god, but she was very afraid to get used to it and live on without him. Everything was ready, and the ceremony was to take place in the morning. Princess Sophia was in a good mood and graciously allowed her sister to enter. Left alone, the main character told her relative about the sharp hair clip that saved her life. Sophia did not want to believe in the veracity of the words, not excluding the fact that the item could be enchanted or poisoned, but still took the gift with great distrust. The time has come for the repeated ritual of sacrifice. The head of state and the new priest announced the beginning of the test. The happy king had high hopes for his beloved daughter, expecting her speedy return from the ancient crypt with a victory for himself. A girl in a beautiful wedding dress was ready to enter the stone gate. Another step, and the huge doors closed, swallowing up a new victim. A terrible noise, grinding screams came from the depths of the cave, frightening the temple guards. The father became worried. He did not remember such sounds and asked the servant whether everything corresponded to the first rite, but he could not answer anything since he had not been present earlier, and the high priest, who refused to participate in repeating the bloody procedure, was in custody. The king and Olivia froze and looked in horror at the entrance to another world. The girl asked the guards to immediately open the gate. Suddenly, the doors opened on their own, and another ancient god, handsome Ray, appeared. The main character realized that the whole world seemed to have disappeared, and she was communicating with the new deity alone. He greeted the girl as if he were an old acquaintance. Olivia ran to the gate, worried about her sister's condition. The darkness from the open crypt seeped into the palace building, and those present left the hall in fear. A black fog enveloped the main character, but she did not give up. Mr. Ray suggested going inside and looking for the victim. The princess walked in the dark and called her sister. The answer was silence. Finally, Olivia saw the poor girl. She was covered in blood. Having touched Sophia, the main character realized that this was a specific mucus, very similar to the traces of monsters, which she had seen more than once before. The smoke gradually cleared, and the guests of the ceremony saw two sisters emerging from the crypt together. King William, pleased with the result of the repeated sacrifice, and making sure that his beloved child was alive, turned to the deity, demanding to serve him and carry out his orders, letting slip about the predecessor from chaos. Ray found out who arrived in this world before him and refused the angry head of the country his requests, citing a different level of ability. The new god asked Olivia about the first god, saying that it was the girl who made a sacrifice a long time ago, freeing not one, but about 100 similar creatures. The handsome man explained that Sophia was not a victim, so she remained alive, but she would be very scared for a long time. Sensing the black magic around Olivia, Ray found the source, which was a small pin on the princess's outfit that blocked connections with the deities. Duchess Kate introduced the means for the slow death of the hated simpleton at the last meeting before the repeat ceremony, so contact with Armando was lost. The king could not believe in the repeated failure and demanded action from Ray. The hard day was over, and the main character returned to the hospitable duchy. Armando met the girl, worried about the sisters and waiting for stories about the ritual. Olivia told about the appearance of the second ancient god, his connection with her and the maid's spell. The girl again tried to find out all the details of the long-ago event. Mr. Armando was upset by the appearance of such a creature in the person of Ray, who was not capable of fighting monsters, as the inhabitants of the kingdom would soon find out, and advised his mistress to stay away from him without explaining the reason. The ancient god was very concerned about the well-being of the princess and did not want to upset her with additional knowledge and memories. The young man increasingly liked this fragile girl with a strong and kind character, and he wanted to always be with her, take care of and protect her. Olivia is very tired of impressions and riddles. The appearance of a new deity shook up society. Everyone was waiting for the final victory over the monsters, hoping for an extraterrestrial messenger from the official princess. The planned offensive and liberation of the next almost captured city, where the main force of monsters had accumulated, was postponed by William's order until Sophia and Mr. Ray were ready to go to the battle site. Greg and Olivia reread the royal decree and could not believe what was happening. The major center of the country, where the Duke's grandfather had already repelled attacks, urgently needed support. All the time since the appearance of the new god, Sophia tried to persuade him to help defeat the monsters, realizing that this was impossible, and her participation in the nightmare sacrifice was in vain. The princess lost consciousness. The army's march was postponed. The Duke of Baxter insisted on urgently convening a meeting of the military council. The father scolded his beloved daughter, who could not cope with God, and insisted on the trip. The princess was getting worse and worse from nervous exhaustion. Handsome Ray did not even leave the palace. He was not interested in the problems of the kingdom. The main character arrived at the palace without waiting for the decision of the council and the date of speaking in defense of the dying city with the beautiful name Listern, which the faithful Sullivan immediately informed his master about. The head of the family did not expect his daughter's arrival and was annoyed. The girl insisted on a speedy attack. With the support of the young duke, she tried to explain that in order to preserve the kingdom, it was necessary to act urgently while the inhabitants of the almost captured duchy had a chance of salvation. Olivia was shocked by her father's gaze. She realized that he did not need victory over monsters, but personal power, and that is why he turned to the ancient deities. Mr. Ray suddenly appeared amidst a family dispute and greeted the main character. The king again demanded that the god freed by the ritual fulfill his wish, starting to shout. The head of state was struck by the message from the extraterrestrial guest about his complete lack of the ability to kill, and therefore he would not be able to defeat the villains. Ray again switched to personal contact with Olivia, unnoticed by anyone, realizing that if the king and his entourage found out about her connection with the second deity, she would have a bad time. The handsome man admitted to the main character that he has abilities related to birth and restoration, and can endow a person with this power. God asked the girl about her dreams and desires. For the first time in her life, the main character knew what she wanted. She dreamed of being able to bring people who had become monsters back to life without outside help. Mr. Ray sighed. His main wish was fulfilled. He was free and could return to chaos. But in order to disappear, he had to wait for confirmation of what had been done. The magic circle on the princess's body surprised the handsome man. Suddenly, Mr. Armando appeared nearby. Magic was his degree of protection for Olivia from black magic after Kate's trick. The two deities met in a world unusual for them in human form for the first time. Ray told his partner that he had only completed his part of the ritual and did not pretend to do more. The young men sorted things out, completely frightening the main character. Armando, as the elder, stopped the debate and turned his attention to the princess standing next to him. God calmed the girl down and promised to take care of her. Tender words haunted Olivia. She did not understand why he showed so much attention to his mistress. Suddenly, the main character found herself alone in the void. A beautiful box floated straight into her hands. Memories of a piece of a calm, happy childhood flashed through her head. Armando appeared and explained that the void is his personal world and a space where there are no strangers. The young man said that the deities do not deceive people, that his dream is to always be with Olivia and do for her whatever she wants. The guy's promises were very tempting and touching, but the girl was afraid that he could disappear at any moment and could not believe his words. A beautiful life was not for the main character. She achieved everything herself. She had never had assistance before. The girl told her fears to the deity. Olivia managed to study many documents, manuscripts, chronicles, without finding information anywhere about how long God can stay in the human world. The young man reassured the main character that she could wait a long time for her cherished desire. The king, having not received the desired result from the second rite, began to analyze the events. The security began checking when the king learned that the second princess decided to go on a hike on her own. It was urgent to correct the situation, and to save his reputation, the king decided to send his beloved daughter to battle. Olivia was preparing for the trip with the main savior. She was surprised by her father's sudden decision. It was useless to wait for help from Sophia. The young people discussed the upcoming trip. Now the main character was no longer so afraid of monsters. God reminded the girl that his actions required clear instructions from the princess. In the morning, the convoy set off. The road was short, and soon a small detachment was at the walls of Listern. The sky above the area was burning brightly. Sophia, seeing the terrible color, was horrified, refusing to get out of the carriage and go into the city. Olivia was also very excited. Mr. Armando, as always, quietly appeared nearby and extended his hand, inviting his girlfriend on the way. The time had come to act. Olivia understood that any delay would kill the locals. The military commander who met the rescue squad was dissatisfied with the small number of arrivals. The losses were significant, and there was practically no one to defend the city. Suddenly there was a roar. The monsters broke through the defenses and were very close. Residents ran away from the monsters, dying under the rubble of buildings and the bodies of huge, terrible, advancing killers. For the first time, Sophia saw such a nightmare. A large monster crawled out behind the crowd of survivors. When the monster got closer, people saw the head and part of the body of a little girl who had not yet completely transformed into a freak. One of those running away recognized the child as his daughter. The people were extremely frightened. The princess could not believe that recently it was just a child. The fighting party prepared to shoot at the reborn monster. The heartbroken father tried to protect the child. The main character tried to help the loving father. Greg tried to stop the princess, realizing the danger. Olivia seemed to hypnotize the monster, putting all her inner strength into her gaze. A powerful flow of energy came from the brave girl. The man fought to the last for his girl, trying to shield her from bullets with his body. The situation changed. The force of influence on the monster increased. The monster came very close to the main character. One more step, and the girl will be captured by huge clawed paws. A beam of light soared into the sky, and the impossible happened. The father held his living daughter in his arms and could not believe what had happened. Those around were also dumbfounded. The monster had never turned back into a human during all the fighting. The warriors and residents of the city understood that the miracle had happened thanks to Olivia. The old Duke of Warren, who had seen many battles, was surprised and glad that his guest was able to help return the girl. He had heard a lot about the ritual, but had not yet seen the guest emerging from the crypt and could hardly believe what was happening. The time has come for the ancient god. The main character and her friends came closer to the place where the monsters were hiding, ordering the destruction of the villains. Mr. Armando only had to fulfill the girl's request. The enemies disappeared one by one. It was a victory. Olivia saw a crowd of transforming demi-humans. There were several hundred mutants, but the main character decided to once again try her power, which Ray gave her. One by one, the inhabitants returned to their bodies. Life continued anew. When the last one was saved, the girl lost consciousness from powerlessness. In a semi-fainting state, Olivia felt that every cell of her body ached, making it impossible to move. This nightmare lasted for several hours. When she woke up, the main character saw Armando faithfully guarding her peace. The girl was very afraid that the gentleman would disappear completely. She was not ready for the loss. God tried to calm the hostess, but his efforts were unsuccessful. Olivia thought that this was false help, to which she would get used, and then it would be even more painful, completely upsetting the young man with her mistrust. Princess Sophia was left alone, not understanding how her crippled sister could perform a miracle, jealous of her celebrity. The main character was very worried that she had offended Mr. Armando, who did not leave her side when she was feeling bad, and the girl went to look for him to apologize. The ancient god in the guise of a young man appeared at the first call. Grandfather and grandson discussed the power of an extraterrestrial deity. Old Warren did not believe in their existence until he himself saw all the power in action. The Duke told his grandson the story of how many years ago he was visiting the young Duke George, who kept a family heirloom. His relatives were very vain and had long dreamed of the royal throne. This was the only book about the ancient deities, their abilities and secrets that no one knew about. The ancient manuscript said that the deity becomes one with the one who made the sacrifice and called him, and the longer he spends in the human world, the more sensitive he will be to all the requests of his master. Greg shared information from the high priest that in return for the sacrifice, the deity is obliged to fulfill the main desire of the caller. The old Duke was afraid that Olivia might change, and instead of good deeds, ask God to fulfill bad deeds and take revenge. Grandfather guessed how the king felt about his daughters, but for political reasons he did not interfere in family affairs, so he was worried that the young lady would remember his silence. Young people walked through the park and enjoyed the silence. Olivia apologized for her words and hoped that the young man would forgive her. The girl tried to find out about the past ritual and sacrifice. She could not remember anything, especially that she had killed someone. The main character thought that if the meeting took place between them, as a guy and a girl, and not as a victim and a deity, she would be the happiest. The news of the victory over the monsters in Listerne and Olivia's rescue of the inhabitants of a large city did not please the king. The liberated duchy was an important strategic military installation with a large number of subjects, and the head of state was concerned about the support it might provide to his unloved daughter. The confrontation between the king, who cared more about his wallet, and the savior of the cities could not work in favor of the first. He understood this perfectly. It was necessary to take protective measures. Together with his bodyguard and friend Sullivan, the head of the country pondered every step in search of a mistake, again settling on a previously unknown priest who was not on the list of temple servants with access to the palace. At the same time, the Duchess's personal housekeeper, Kate, reported to her mistress that the king became interested in the new priest, worried about the safety of his mistress. The maid was afraid that the deception with her changing clothes on the instructions of her mistress would be revealed. The friend of the first princess was confident in her plan. The desire to fulfill her father's dream and seize the throne had possessed her since childhood. The king did not keep himself waiting long and came to Kate for an explanation. The morning in the Duchy of Magdeburg began with news. Over breakfast, Olivia learned that she had been invited to a private round table meeting to determine the location of the next monster battle. The girl was confused that the venue for the event would be an old castle with a lake, and she suspected something was wrong. Duke Grey promised to accompany and protect the guest. All the invited members of the council were assembled and were waiting for the king. The emperor came accompanied by Princess Sophia, which surprised the guests. The meeting began with a proposal from the head of state to speak in Lorac, since there had been no news from there for more than a month. Olivia took the floor and said that after the defeat in 2 cities, the monsters had gathered all their forces in the remote Duchy of Stone, where the troops should be sent. From the latest reports from military intelligence officers, it became known that monsters are able to communicate with each other at a distance and are more developed creatures. Mr. Baxter was on the girl's side, realizing that the demons had not evaporated, but were accumulating forces for an attack in one place. The king was dissatisfied with his daughter's statement, but agreed with the compelling arguments of the princess, who was frightened by her father's calm behavior. She understood that she was part of some kind of plan. The head of state knew that the ancient stone, the breadbasket of the kingdom, would be a very strong argument in the event of Olivia's victory, but voiced his positive decision. The departure was planned in 2 days. There was a plan, of course, and it was Kate's idea, which she proposed to her sovereign during his last visit, after studying the family heirloom about the gods. At a meeting of the military council, the head of state again insisted on the trip of his second daughter Sophia as part of the detachment. The conversation between the Duchess and the king lasted almost the entire night. Kate reminded that the action of the ancient deity is connected only with the personal instructions of the princess, and therefore the source must be removed, and Mr. Armando will be powerless. The meeting ended. Olivia and Greg were about to go home, but suddenly Sophia asked her sister to listen to her. The young duke left the girls, and the princess said that her father became very irritable with her, constantly scolding and shouting at his beloved daughter. Sophia said that she knew the reason why the head of the family agreed to the trip. The sister was very upset, and the main character tried to calm her down. The girls continued the conversation over a cup of tea. The first princess expressed gratitude for her sister's support and understanding, despite her constant bad attitude. Suddenly, everything in Olivia's head swam and disappeared into a fog. The main character was lying on the carpet and could not move. Kate's plan began to come true. She invited the king to destroy Olivia so that her mistress could live as before. Without worrying about anything, the lord agreed, not realizing that this was only the first part of the evil intent. It was easy to persuade the princess to give her sister tea with a potion, saying that it was only a sleeping pill. The maid carried the body of the poor girl to a specially prepared room. Waking up on a large bed in an unknown hall, the main character gradually began to come to her senses. The appearance of her father did not surprise Olivia. She understood everything. The girl tried to get up, but fell. Her legs did not obey her at all. The king was upset. He hoped that the potion would work for several days, but for some reason the medicine did not work completely. The head of state said that the trip would take place without her participation. To prevent the main character from creating problems, despite attempts to resist, the father poured another elixir into the girl, given to him by Kate. Olivia tried to call Armando, but the head of the family upset her, reminding her that interaction was carried out only under certain conditions, and since the princess did not know where she was, her master would not be able to come to the rescue. The king said that an accident would happen next. His daughter, returning from a tea party with her sister, would fall into the lake, and it would be impossible to save her. The father left the unfortunate girl lying on the floor. The main character's consciousness was clouded. Fragments of thoughts were flying in her head. She could not move at all. Suddenly, the room was enveloped in a red mist, frightening the king. An unknown force was tearing the ruler of the state apart. Thinking that the ancient deity had heard the call and came to the aid of the girl, he began to beg for mercy. Greg, waking up from an incomprehensible dream, went in search of Olivia. Having met Sophia, the young man persuaded the girl to tell her where her sister was. The king's unwanted daughter was kept in an old tower that no one used. The young duke ran to save his guest. Armando suddenly appeared, looking very menacing. Together, the young men reached the place where the princess was imprisoned. The power of the deity helped open the locked doors. The head of state lay on the floor in one of the rooms. He could not get up from pain and horror and begged for mercy. The king pretended that he did not remember anything and did not know where his second daughter was. The ancient god did not believe a single word of the liar. The head of state had to confess and tell what happened to Olivia and where she is. The main character was lying on the floor. It was as if she was all shrouded in a dense red fog. Thoughts that she was constantly being betrayed, mocked at her feelings, were flying in her head. Gradually, the desire came to deal with the whole world, which was so cruel to the poor girl, to kill father. Mr. Armando appeared and brought the princess back to reality. The main character did not believe in her salvation. Olivia reported that she could not walk at all. Her legs did not obey her. The abilities of the ancient deity were destruction and destruction, but the young man found an option on how to cure his mistress. The secret was that you had to go back in time by turning back time. The young people decided to begin the healing process immediately, but to use the additional abilities of the deity they had to pay. The price was the intimacy of the couple. The main character had never been with men, but she trusted Armando, so she decided to take this step, the price of which was high. The deity transported the girl to his space, where it was light and calm. The gentle touches, breathing, and warmth of the young man's body excited the princess. She felt good. The closeness with the master was pleasant and unforgettable. Lightning flashed in the king's chambers. Olivia entered the tower hall with her god. The news of the princess's appearance reached the main enemy, but Kate was not upset. Her plan had already begun to take effect. The insidious duchess believed that the main goal had been achieved. Olivia would no longer be able to live as before and forgive her family. The two main forces of the state would fight each other to the end. Sophia's maid prepared to wait for the results in order to take the throne herself. At this time, Greg was trying to figure out who was behind the clearly developed plan, realizing that the king was not the main person in this scam. The main character revealed the name of the enemy without completely losing consciousness after drinking the potion. She recognized the voice and outline of the person who brought her to the tower. The Duchess's knowledge of the principles of the existence of the ancient gods was not clear. The young man remembered his grandfather's story about the family tome and the vain thoughts of one distant duchy. This was Kate's homeland. Olivia decided to first save the inhabitants of the country and deal with the monsters, and then study the ancient manuscript and take revenge. The young duke was pleased with the performance, but was worried about the girl's condition. The departure was planned for an early time, and the young people said goodbye to see each other soon. Morning came. The cruise set off. The main character recalled a moment of intimacy with the deity. The girl felt very good in Armando's space. She did not believe that this was possible. The young man opened her a large, beautiful box with her childhood memories when the main character was truly happy. It was quiet all around. Flowers were growing and butterflies were flying, and the savior was nearby. Olivia realized that she was able to walk again and couldn't believe it. Pleasant memories were interrupted by a sudden stop. People crowded around the carriages. These were residents of cities captured by monsters who managed to hide in the forests. They rejoiced at the arrival of the princess and hoped for a quick victory. The young duke tried to protect his companion from the cheering crowd. A young man separated from the group of people and introduced himself as Marcel, helping the local residents and telling them about the exploits of the princess. The deities recognized each other and were surprised. The young man was another of the ancient gods who appeared in the human world and had the ability of omniscience. The idea was the same. The appearance of a new extraterrestrial being meant that there was a ritual with sacrifice. Having moved to a safe place, Marcel said that he is a magician and helps those in need. Armando and Olivia did not believe the words. They knew the power of the ancient creatures. Realizing that he had been exposed and the joke had failed, the unsuccessful magician confessed that he, too, had come from the other world at the invitation of a person. Next to the deity sat a modest guy with glasses and the same raincoat. The timid young man introduced himself as Kevin. He was the second son of the head of the city. The first was smart and strong. High hopes were placed on him. But the death of the capital changed plans. The new deity was summoned by the guy's older brother, who, during the capture of Stone by monsters, managed to sacrifice himself, making a wish to save the inhabitants. Kevin remained to fulfill the request of his beloved relative, who died for the sake of others. He also discovered the partial abilities of the coming deity to see the past and read thoughts, but they could not win without the power of Mr. Armando. The guy told several facts about Olivia's past, and she finally believed in his words. A group of like-minded people gathered before attacking the enemy to discuss the last details. According to Kevin, the monsters gathered in a large castle on the outskirts of Stone. The young man said that while there is calm in the enemy's camp, we must act. Everyone was interested in one question. What do the monsters need from people, and why did they get out of their chaos and start the battle? Even Marcel did not know the enemy's goal, since he could not see the future. Mr. Armando was ready for the princess's order. The friends set off. Victory had to belong to the people. There was silence in the ancient castle. The monsters were also preparing for battle. The ancient god reminded the main character of the wish that he expects after the battle. The girl remembered everything and delayed the moment of separation. The young people approached the gates of the main building unnoticed. Monsters appeared ahead, and Olivia ordered her defender to destroy all enemies. Armando was irresistible, just a few seconds, and the long-awaited peace came. Monsters no longer existed at all. The bright blue sky informed local residents of the victory. Kevin couldn't believe what happened. Everything turned out to be simpler than he expected. God was waiting for his main desire. His strength in the human world was drying up, but the girl should not have known about it. The main character was ready to express her request. Olivia really wanted to punish all those who were unfair and cruel to her. After the last attempt, this became her dream. The words were already ready to escape from the princess's lips. But looking at the young man, she asked for more time to think. The people rejoiced and thanked their saviors. The war was over. Kevin gave the guest his room. She needed to have a good rest before the return trip. Olivia asked the young man to share moments of his past life. He told what he could. Suddenly, the main character heard the voices of ancient deities, although they were in a different place. Through the owner of the house, Marcel conveyed to the girl his conversation with Armando, who was gradually losing contact with her due to his long stay in human form. Olivia was upset and worried about her master's condition. Having asked Kevin to use the gift of his god, Olivia found out the main thing that had been bothering her lately, already guessing that the victim of the very first ritual was her mother. The main character considered herself an immoral person, despite the fact that she saved so many people. The girl did not remember the circumstances of the long-standing tragedy at all. Morning came. The young duke came to pick up the princess. It was time to hit the road again. The harnessed carriages were ready for the long journey. Marcel came to say goodbye to his new friends, and finally he told the girl that a rebellion would soon break out in the capital of the kingdom, and you need to be prepared for betrayal and lies. The good god reassured the princess that she would emerge victorious and become the queen of her state. The main character was confused. She was ready to win another battle, but the kingdom is a heavy burden of responsibility. She has not yet thought about it. The carriages set off. The residents of the big city promised their savior support in all her endeavors. Along the way, the convoy stopped for the night in a forest in the mountains. Armando saw the girl's anxiety and was ready to share her fears. Olivia could not sleep, pondering the prophetic words of her new acquaintances. The defender of the main character could not understand why the girl was sad from the moment she left, suspecting Mr. Marcel's participation in this. Olivia has revealed the secret of her sadness. Now she knows who was the victim, and that her friend is losing physical strength by remaining nearby. The young man did not understand how the girl was holding up after learning the terrible fact, once again amazed at her fortitude and perseverance. Armando promised to be there and wait as long as necessary, without worrying about his condition. A sunny morning greeted dear guests in the Duchy of Magdeburg. Warren returned home earlier and was glad to meet him. Everyone gathered at the table to discuss the results of the battle and future plans. The bodyguard of the old duke said that during the campaign, the king did not leave the palace, but he was able to tame the second ancient god Ray, who now carries out his orders. Without even resting, Olivia decided to go to the capital to clarify the circumstances. There was no other ritual, which means another force was acting on the deity. Everyone present thought that only an ancient manuscript could tame any inhabitant of the crypt, which means Lady Kate had conceived a new plan. The first priority was to confiscate the book from the Duchess. It was necessary to find a way to solve this problem. Armando said that papers are not needed if there is an author, and he is familiar to everyone present, since he is now in the human world. Yes, it was Marcel who was the author of the ancient document. The Duke and his grandson did not believe in luck. They could begin to act. Left alone, the owners of Magdeburg discussed how much Olivia had changed after the assassination attempt. Warren was afraid that now the girl was driven only by rage, and she was ready to forget everything good and kind for the sake of revenge, recalling that the duchy had never taken part in political intrigues. Greg protected the princess. He knew what she had gone through before, but she did not lose her kindness and compassion for people's troubles. He remained by her side. Olivia was very worried about her god. She did not want to take him with her on the upcoming trip to the palace, seeing his condition. Mr. Armando held on with all his strength, and as soon as Olivia got into the carriage, he retreated into his space, where he had been staying almost constantly lately, accumulating strength. There was a commotion in Sophia's room. The girl heard about her sister's imminent arrival and was very afraid of the meeting. The princess asked to find her friend, who had served her for a long time, but Kate did not appear. Olivia visited her sister immediately upon arriving at the palace. At the table, having refused tea, the girl expressed all her complaints to a relative who had recently tried to poison her, noting that she was still upset and worried about what had happened. Taking advantage of her sister's feelings, Olivia asked to fulfill a small request so that she could make amends a little. Sophia was really upset by the assassination attempt and agreed to help. Late at night, the king's legitimate daughter went to Kate's room in search of an unknown handwritten document. Not noticing that she was being watched, the girl tried to find the right thing on the table among the many books and papers, Not understanding what she was looking for, there were no clear instructions from her sister. Suddenly, someone approached the princess from behind and put a knife to her throat. Sophia said her name, and the surprised maid of the Duchess lowered her weapon. According to the learned plan, the girl said that Olivia had forced her to come here with threats. Unexpectedly for both, the hostess entered the room, very surprised at the uninvited guests. She never expected to see her mistress at night in her mansion. The princess told her maid that she had come without waiting for Kate, despite repeated invitations. The maid went to accompany the uninvited guest to the exit. Having made sure that everything was in place, the Duchess accused the assistant of being in a hurry and revealing herself, ordering her to further monitor both princesses. In the park, Sophia was met by the young Duke and his partner. After making sure that the princess had not found anything, the young men left, advising the girl to return to her chambers. The purpose of the late visit of the princess to her friend was to attract the attention of the enemy. Olivia did not expect results from the search for the document, but made it clear to the enemy that she knew something and was looking for the manuscript. What was needed was Marcel, who was eagerly awaited. Left alone, the main character realized that she really missed the ancient god and called him. She said that she had made the final decision to be a real queen and asks him to help not seize the throne by killing her father, but to become a fair ruler, living in the interests of her subordinates, having power, authority, and strength. Olivia promised to make the main wish after defeating the head of state and asked Armando to temporarily not appear with her and save energy, which would still be useful for internal battles. The young man agreed with the mistress's plan, but promised to appear if she was in mortal danger. The young man disappeared, and the princess tried to calm herself with the thought that she had to get used to his absence and do everything herself. The day of the reception arrived, which the king organized on the occasion of the victory, inviting the heroes of the battles and the aristocrats of the state to his palace. The princess was irresistible. It was the first time she had dressed up like this, trying to show her calmness. The girl entered the reception hall, accompanied by the Dukes of Magdeburg. The invited guests immediately noticed the absence of the ancient god. The king appeared on the stairs along with Princess Sophia, and those present greeted the head of state. The bishop gave a speech, thanking all the heroes, including his daughter Olivia, and declared an era of worldly calm. The head of the country said that he had also acquired the power to control chaos. The king said that after a long conversation, the second god agreed with his sincere desire to save the world and took the side of the sovereign. The guests greeted their ruler again. An old enemy, Sullivan, found the princess among the guests and expressed his master's desire to meet his daughter alone. In the throne room, her father was waiting for the girl, who was dissatisfied when he saw the accompaniment in the person of the young duke, who promised never to leave Olivia alone again. In response to her father's order to return to the palace, the main character refused, further angering the head of the country. Kate's assistant told her about the secret family conversation between the royals. The Duchess was not very upset by the news. Her next plan was ready for action, and the maid went to observe the enemies. In the palace park, Olivia and Greg, suspecting surveillance, had a conversation about the reception and shared thoughts about the king's new power. The girl mentioned that Mr. Armando disappeared, fulfilling her wish, and she was left completely without support. The maid Kate hid in a tree, listening carefully to information about the force approaching the capital to help Olivia and the third ancient god who had appeared recently. The young people started talking about the betrayal of Lady Kate. Olivia proposed to deal with her and her loved ones first. Frightened, the maid rushed into the palace to warn her mistress about the threat. The appearance of a strange girl in the reception hall frightened the guests. The Duchess was very unhappy with the appearance of her assistant. In private, the girl informed the hostess about support detachments gathering around the capital. A messenger was sent immediately to verify important information. The result was not long in coming. The informer confirmed the information. The leaders of the 3 cities, the priest and the unknown, were not far from the city. The maid was very worried about her mistress, who decided to exercise extra caution. It was decided to temporarily isolate the assistant by locking her in the basement. The Duchess requested an audience with the king, informing him that Olivia's ancient god had indeed disappeared. The information required verification, and the ruler turned to the enchanted Ray, who was indignant at such a petty question, and received an affirmative answer. The deity did not feel his relative in the human world, which means he does not exist. Kate admitted that her main goal is to kill Olivia, so she is on the side of the sovereign and his legitimate daughter. The plan proposed to the king by his friend Sophia was very simple. 3 more days of the reception passed quickly, the invitees whispering among themselves, discussing the absence of the second princess with her extraterrestrial protector and supporting the head of state with his new strength. The last day of the reception was the most important. Several official events were planned, at which all members of the royal family were required to attend. It was clear that it was on this day that a secret assassination attempt would be made on the unwanted daughter. The first on the plan was a friendly dinner for members of the royal family and high-ranking aristocracy. The most dangerous place was the main temple, where many people were supposed to gather for the ritual of prayer for the well-being of the kingdom. The chief priest called both princesses to the altar. According to custom, in the name of peace and tranquility of the state, girls had to drink the Holy Grail. Olivia touched the crystal glass with the second one, clearly realizing that there was poison there. In the crowd of guests, the Duchess froze, anticipating victory. Suddenly, a temple maid appeared in the hall, warning everyone that the cup was poisoned. The girl in sacred robes accused Lady Kate of deliberately killing the second princess. Those gathered in the temple could not believe it. No one expected that the Duchess was capable of such an act. Olivia insisted on immediately interrogating the girl, realizing that if she was locked up in prison, everything would be forgotten and the truth would not be found. Miss Kate agreed to answer and categorically denied any wrongdoing. The high-ranking person hoped for the assistance of the king and the worthlessness of the testimony of some servant. Olivia asked the girl to remove her hood. The Duchess's maid was kneeling in front of a large number of invited guests. Kate got her bearings right away, accusing the assistant of envy and anger towards the mistress, who locked her in the basement for educational purposes. The girl told in detail everything that she saw at night in the temple, trying to stop the lady. For this disobedience, the maid, according to her, was put under lock and key. The bishop tried to postpone the interrogation of both accused. The culmination of the moment was the maid's information about the secret meeting of the Duchess and the king on the eve of the ceremony. The guests whispered about a conspiracy and an unsuccessful attempt to kill the princess. The king had no choice but to give the order to take Kate into custody and send her to prison until a separate trial. The enraged Duchess accused the king of ordering Olivia's death. The head of state did not expect such words, publicly recognizing the girl as having lost her mind and having come up with all sorts of stupid things to avoid punishment. Led by the owner of Magdeburg, the knights of the duchy appeared in the temple and took the princess under guard. The duke said that he was defending the state, not the king, who ordered his guards to use weapons. It was a terrible sin. The princess, surrounded by defenders, left the temple to avoid bloodshed in the sacred place. Lady Kate sat behind bars in an empty dungeon. The main character visited the defeated enemy, wanting to know the reason for her hatred since childhood. The Duchess offered a deal in exchange for her safety, but Olivia didn't want any help. The princess recalled the attitude towards her, rotten food and bullying that she heard from the Duchess, not understanding why the powers that be were so cruel to poor and needy people. A council of war was held in Magdeburg. The princess and the owners of the duchy discussed the balance of forces approaching the capital. The appearance of the Duchess's assistant interrupted the conversation. A second, and the poor maid was transformed into a laughing Marcel, who deftly played out the entire scene in the temple using his abilities. The next task was to rescue Mr. Ray from the hands of the king. The ancient god was tricked into signing a contract, and the task was how to terminate it. Considering the young man's minimal abilities for destruction, his strength was quite insignificant. The opposite should have been Olivia's strength, given to her by the second deity. The omniscient explained to the girl that the ancient gods also live in chaos, but unlike monsters, they do not wish harm to people. The young man recalled that Armando is obliged to fulfill the main request of his mistress. Marcel invited the princess to use his abilities by making a wish. The wish that the third god had to fulfill was childhood memories. Olivia felt like a little girl sitting in a dungeon with her mother, where her father, the king, had put them in order to get rid of the woman's annoying requests. The child heard the tears of the mother, calling on the deity to free her from captivity and promising to sacrifice her child for the sake of a happy life. The girl did not understand anything. She struggled and did not want to die at all. She managed to grab a dagger, which, in the process of freeing herself from her mother's embrace, accidentally pierced the woman's body. The child lay for a long time, hugging the silent parent and not understanding what had happened. The poor girl was saved by a boy who suddenly appeared, who turned out to be a very young deity, emerging from chaos for the first time. The guy took the baby home, laid her on the bed and calmed her down, promising to always be there. A friendship began. The little god's name was Armando. The children did everything together. Thanks to the young man's care, the feeling of pain dulled a little. The happiest moment was walking through the clearing near the house, where there were many flowers and butterflies. The guy became practically the girl's older brother. One day, an elderly man appeared in the house, introduced himself as grandfather, and took the children into his house. For the first time, Olivia had toys and gifts. The relative often left somewhere, citing business, and the girl was left alone. She was very afraid that her grandfather would disappear and obeyed him unconditionally. The young man was almost always nearby, concealing the child's loneliness. The baby was forbidden to go outside, play with other children, and communicate with servants. Armando did not understand the restrictions. It was reminiscent of the dungeon from which he rescued the child. The girl was still happy about her new family and was afraid of upsetting her grandfather. One fine day, a relative took the children to the park. The sun was shining and the birds were singing. A tied rabbit was sitting in a clearing. The grandfather ordered his granddaughter to kill the little beast with a sword, but she could not. Then the man demanded that God do this at the girl's request. The unfortunate child was very afraid of losing her family and asked Armando to carry out the order. The innocent animal lay covered in blood, with a weapon sticking out of its body. The girl could not sleep all night. She was tormented by nightmares. Her friend was nearby. The young man came to deal with a relative who was abusing the child, but he was relentless. One day, the man took the children to the capital to see the king himself. On that day, Olivia learned that her grandfather had the title of count. The head of state was furious. He did not want to recognize the girl and take her to the palace. The children did not understand what was happening. The girl was scared and wanted to return home. Hearing the ruler's refusal, the count ordered the little child to kill the guards. The girl, in complete confusion, asked her friend to carry out the decree of her beloved grandfather. The bodies of dead soldiers lay throughout the palace chamber. A compelling argument forced the king to change his decision, and the child remained to live in a new house. The girl still did not communicate with anyone and was lonely. The only protection and support was the faithful Armando. Suddenly, difficult times came for the state. Monster attacks were registered on almost all the cities of the kingdom, and a military council had to be assembled, at which Olivia's grandfather was present. The king was scared. The monsters came close, and the destruction of the capital was a matter of time. The grandfather received the status of a duke. No one asked the child's wishes. The girl and her friend were simply sent to kill the enemy. Before the trip, a relative introduced his granddaughter to the young duke, following the example of his grandfather, the glorious knight of Magdeburg, who fled to the war. For 3 years, the trio fought the enemy. In one of the battles, the forces were unequal. The warriors were killed, and the teenagers managed to escape. Having found a secluded place, the friends discussed a breakthrough plan, since there was nowhere to wait for help. In the morning, there was a battle again. There was nowhere to wait for help. We could only rely on our own strength. Armando was wounded. He could no longer fight the monsters. One of the monsters grabbed Olivia, trying to kill her. Gathering his last strength, the young god struck the monster without a sword. This was the first time this had happened to him. The girl fell from the clutches of the monster, injuring her leg. The monsters disappeared, leaving 3 young wounded fighters on the battlefield. The 3 of them on horseback returned home. The king was unhappy. Monsters were approaching the borders, and the ancient deity was exhausted and could not fight. Olivia suggested sending palace knights to protect the capital, leaving them and Armando to heal their wounds. The young man could not move and was practically unconscious, but his grandfather and the king ordered him to go kill the monsters again. Otherwise, they would capture the palace. The main character looked at those around her and only now began to understand that all their words about love and family were lies. No one ever thought about her, neither her mother nor her newly appeared relative. No one came to the rescue when she was fighting with the knights for the liberation of cities. Many died without receiving help from the palace. She really wanted to take revenge and kill everyone who sent her to war, who offended her and mocked her feelings. For his granddaughter's refusal, the Duke decided to use force, dealing with the rebellious child. Suddenly, grandfather fell, struck by a sword. Olivia looked back and saw her friend. He was alive and unharmed. The wounds miraculously disappeared, but new strength and abilities appeared. Armando invited the girl to fulfill her wish, which he heard in her heart. Olivia agreed to revenge. The instruments of retribution flew in the royal hall, not sparing anyone present. People tried to escape, but fell dead. Young Greg, making his way through the fleeing crowd, tried to stop his angry girlfriend. The king begged for mercy, promising to give her everything she wanted. The tired heroine left the palace with Armando, leaving behind the blood and bodies of the dead. The girl took revenge on all the offenders, but did not feel joy or relief, not understanding why she should live on. Seeing the suffering of her loved one, the ancient deity promised to always be there and invited her to make a real wish that would bring her happiness. Armando proposed to conduct the last rites, which would involve all of humanity and the gods of chaos. The desire was very complex. It was necessary to turn back time, erase Olivia's memory of the bloody events, and choose a different path in life for her, without her mother and grandfather, and without revenge. In response, the young man asked to fill his magic box with the happiest moments of his life, so that in the darkness of chaos, he could enjoy the bright memories of the meeting. The girl remembered only one, where they were running around a flowery lawn as children. The ritual began to take effect. The main character disappeared. The remaining gods reproached their comrade in arms for madness, realizing that this was an almost impossible task even for them, and Armando would die, destroying himself. But the young man knew that he had to cope for the sake of the first and only one who pulled him out of the darkness. Early in the morning, the maid brought a little girl to the king. Her mother died in captivity, and the child was left alone. The head of state was angry. He did not need a second daughter from some commoner who imagined herself to be his beloved and who had to be locked in the basement with the child. The princess was even more indignant when she learned that she had a lame beggar sister. A little time passed. The state was uneasy. Monsters were approaching the borders and capturing cities, and the ruler decided to conduct a ritual to summon the ancient gods to protect the country. Since the victim was supposed to be a person of the royal family, they remembered the poor girl who lived in the palace annex, patiently listening to the humiliation, but she did not want to die at all. The ceremony took place and the old friends met again. Having endured endless torment and trials, the matured Armando took Olivia out of the crypt, as should have happened according to her first wish. She did not remember anything about her past life and their many years of communication. Now the main character knew everything. The only mistress of 100 ancient deities ran to the place of the last meeting with her master, realizing how much he had done for her, and miraculously did not die himself. The main character repeatedly asked Armando to leave the space, but to no avail. Remembering Marcel's words about the nature of a deity to keep his promises and her request not to appear near her until she defeats the king, Olivia realized that there was no point in waiting. The girl sat alone in the garden and made a plan for victory over the hated sovereign. In the morning, on all corners of the capital, letters were seen, certified by the high priest, where the king was accused of repeated attempts on the life of his second daughter, the protector of the people from terrible monsters, and who had restored life to thousands of degenerated inhabitants. The people discussed the news. The city included detachments of knights of the Duchy of Magdeburg, who had never previously taken part in politics and always spoke out in defense of the kingdom. The troops under the leadership of both dukes lined up in the palace square and waited for the command. Enraged aristocrats who came out of the palace demanded that Olivia be pacified and surrender to the ruler of the state. After listening to the speakers, the main character asked to give her the king. In case of disobedience, the leader of the knightly army promised to start killing the aristocrats of the highest nobility who supported the head of the country and helped him in attempts on her life, thereby creating a split in society and giving guarantees to ordinary people. The king had to leave the palace. He appeared accompanied by a small detachment of royal knights. In front of a large number of people, Olivia accused her father of making repeated attempts on her life. Deciding that there was no point in continuing the dialogue, the head of state ordered his soldiers to seize the girl and send her to prison until trial. The commander of the royal detachment refused to carry out the order, which contradicts the code of knights, explaining that the girl is a heroine and the majority will stand up to protect her, and a bloody battle that no one needs will begin. The enraged sovereign promised to kill the daredevil first, reminding him that he had dark power, which he intended to use immediately. Princess Sophia ran out of the palace, publicly confirmed the facts of the assassination attempts, and asked her father to leave her sister alone. For the young girl, Olivia was the only close person who, despite the mocking attitude towards her, always tried to help and protect her own blood. Realizing that there would be no support, William called on the ancient deity. Black fog began to envelop everything around. The tornado approached the main character, but she had prepared in advance to save the enchanted ray. Mr. Armando appeared next to the girl, surprising those around her. Duchess Kate, who helped her sovereign tame the second deity, told only part of the knowledge from the ancient manuscript, concealing the most important thing, which Olivia took advantage of. The abilities of two powerful deities, given to the girl earlier, helped free the crypt inhabitant from the forced contract. Olivia regretted that she considered the king her father. She reminded him of the massacre that took place in the palace many years ago, where the head of the country begged for mercy of a little girl who was driven to anger and revenge by her family and friends. In horror, the bishop committed suicide. The throne was free. The owners of the duchy were glad that, thanks to the princess, the uprising did not involve bloodshed. Victory was declared. The people welcomed the heroine and her deity. This was gratitude for all their services in the liberation of cities and the salvation of the inhabitants of the state. The time has come for the princess's main wish. The only thing the girl wanted was for the man who was always kind, attentive to her, wished her happiness, endured endless suffering for her sake, and whom she fell in love with, to remain by her side forever. Olivia sighed and pronounced the long-awaited verdict, expressing the desire that her God would always and everywhere be happy, upsetting the young man, who wanted to fulfill any order of his one and only. After the procedure was completed, the two ancient deities left the human world, and Armando fell into sleep to wake up as a human. A year of hard work passed to restore cities, publish new laws protecting the interests of the people. One evening, the princess, as usual, was telling the news of the day to a friend lying breathless when she heard the long-awaited voice. Olivia couldn't believe her luck. She admitted how much she loved him. The time has come. According to customs, the crowning ceremony of the princess took place in the main temple. At the festive reception, Sophia approached the young queen, who abandoned the throne and helped her sister. The girl puzzled her eminent sister by asking her to arrange a wedding with a duke from a neighboring state. Olivia promised to collect the necessary information and help. Armando was interested in an unknown topic, and Greg sighed, expressing the wish that aristocrats marry for love and not for status. The couple tried to spend a lot of time together. They could not part for long, starting to get bored. The young man tried to help the girl in royal matters, jointly solving certain problems of national importance. Late at night, having put off studying the endless array of documents, the young people went to rest. The lovers were happy together. Armando could not get enough of his only beauty, for whom he gave up eternal life. In the morning, Olivia usually went to receptions and ceremonies. There was still a lot to change in her home country. Armando wished his mistress success. He did not leave the palace almost all the time. Having decided to find out more about the wedding, the young man went to his only friend and comrade in the struggle. Greg said that first he needed to make an offer and give a valuable gift. But if you take Queen Olivia, then she will not be interested in wealth. It is better to do something with your own hands. This will be more valuable than all the jewelry in the world. The next evening, while studying the mail and signing instructions, the girl invited her friend to go on vacation to the city where the festival was held. Trying not to stand out from the crowd, the young people looked at everything around with interest. It was a real holiday with shopping arcades and entertainment. Olivia had never been to such events before. She really liked everything. But most of all, the girl was struck by the bright flowers of extraordinary beauty. I couldn't take my eyes off the fragrant wonder. The festival ended with fireworks, during which, according to custom, lovers proposed to each other. It was believed that the feeling would live forever, and Armando proposed marriage to the girl. The lover's answer was negative. Olivia believed that, despite love, she had no right to keep her friend, wishing him freedom and meeting new people and lands. Citing fatigue, the queen left for the palace, leaving the young man alone. Armando began to spend less time with his beloved, leaving the palace. Now in the evenings, she often sat alone, remembering happy moments. The girl realized how much she missed her friend, and that he was the only one in her life who made her happy. One day, Olivia found a list of merchant ships calling at the royal port, suspecting that Armando was about to leave. The young man often began to come late, in dirty clothes, tired, and the girl's fears grew. One day, waking up at night and not finding a friend nearby, the main character was very scared. The queen learned from the guard that the young man had recently left for a ship that had arrived unscheduled, and with tears in her eyes, she rushed to catch up with her friend, realizing that she might not see him again. The gentleman stood thoughtfully near the carriage. Seeing the tear-stained girl, Armando was upset and tried to find out who had offended his mistress. The girl asked him not to leave her because she could not imagine life without her beloved. The couple in love hugged, and the young man showed his beauty his wedding gift. It was a huge plot in the far garden of the palace park, where he himself planted strange flowers delivered to him on ships from different countries. The wedding ceremony was not long in coming. They were the happiest couple in the entire kingdom. The young people vowed to love each other in sorrow and joy, wealth and poverty, sickness and health, not knowing what else fate would have in store for them and what trials they would encounter along the path of life.